All right, and we are live. Yo, yo, what up? What up? What up? Come on
Yo,
in the
yo,
room.
come in the building.
Yeah, you're in the building. Come on in. We
Yeah,
are
we're gonna
live.
we're gonna share this joint.
Yeah, let me as well get to share this as we get ready to dive into this topic on tonight.
Man, this is a dope setup, bro.
Oh, thanks,
This is
man.
a real dope setup, man. Yeah, this was good. I gotta tighten up. Yeah, buddy, that's dope, man. That's dope.
Yeah, trying to get something going here, man.
Yeah, man. I see you, dog.
All right, let's see. I want to share the live video, but for some odd, okay, here we go. I'm about to say
Yeah,
for
I just
some
shared the
odd
post
reason
just
I
now.
ain't
Yeah,
seeing it.
yeah, I just shared it on my page.
All right, there we go. Let me share this on my page. It took a few more steps.
No, you
There we
good,
go.
man. You good, brother.
All right, if you're in the building, please share this.
What up? What up? Oh yeah, you got this going to the YouTube and the Facebook, right?
Yep, yes, sir.
Oh, that's fresh. That's fresh.
All right, yeah. Tune on in. Let's see what we got going on here. Hey man, thank you for everybody for tuning in this evening as we get ready to dive into this topic of faith and reason and how those things are not in conflict with each other,
Right.
but we'll also get to see how they actually function and work with each other, and we don't have to be afraid of trying to tackle what does it mean to have faith and what it means to have reason all at the same time. So give a couple seconds for anybody else who'd like to tune in at this time as we get ready to get this party started.
I always mess this up, man, because I know you got the. Is this on your? This is on your new YouTube page, right?
Yes, this is on the Unapologetically Black, Unashamedly Christian YouTube page.
That's what I thought. Yeah,
Yep.
I always get that backwards. You know what I'm saying? But that's terrible. Oh man,
It's all good, man.
it's a shame because I was at the first unapologetically black, unashamedly Christian event. You know what I'm saying? And I still be messing up, man. I still be, I be still messing it up, man.
Yeah, actually, you were the very first speaker at the very first Unapologetically Black, Unashamedly Christian conference, and now you're actually the very first speaker on the first episode of the Unapologetically Black, Unashamedly Christian podcast. So, man, you the OG, so
The
you
OG.
gotta get it down, man.
Oh man, no, it is funny, man. I know we joked about this before, but y'all were my first opportunity to do an out of town event. You know what I'm saying? So when I showed up in Bloomington, man, I was determined to give y'all every bit of study I had. You know what I'm saying? I was determined, boy. I was going, I think I ended up going at least like 2 hours and like 45 minutes, or if not that, I mean, pretty close to it. And which is terrible pulpit etiquette for a guest. You know what I'm saying? but you were gracious enough to let me slide with it, man. So I appreciate it, man. I learned a lot after that to say, you know what, I am definitely long-winded and I need to trim it down a bit. I learned my lesson, you know what I'm saying?
Man, like that was our first kind of like introduction to that, man. So like for us, it was like, man, it was just like soaking it up. It didn't even seem like that, man. But hey, that's just how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, man. It was fun though, man. It was fun, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely,
I'm
man.
sharing this to my YouTube page.
Yeah, that was just, and that was man, that was about 4 years ago, man.
Man, that's crazy, bro.
Yeah, man.
That's wild, man. That's really wild.
And you've been to every one. But I guess since we're sitting there talking, I guess we might as well get an introduction going on, man.
Oh yeah, might as well. Yeah. I'm sharing this to my pages and stuff like that.
Got you.
Yep. Let my
While you're
Patreon
doing
know.
that, I'll kind of just talk about, what we're doing, what the podcast is about, what these next couple episodes will be about, and then we'll get into the introduction of who our guest is for today. So, I want to welcome everybody to the Unapologetically Black, Unashamedly Christian podcast, the first episode. Hey, listen, I appreciate everybody who tuned in. If you could do me a favor, please, and share this on your social media platforms or wherever you are. Share this. It is greatly appreciated. Also, we're going to have a couple giveaways today as well too, just celebrating our beginning of our podcast. So we can give away a couple of t-shirts, and we're gonna give away a copy of a book that we'll talk about in a minute here. And I just want to as we begin our podcast, we're gonna spend our first couple episodes centering the conversation around thinking biblically. Like, it is important for us to, as believers, to make sure that we are thinking biblically when it comes to all things. And we see there's so much that's going on in society and in the world. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how are we filtering our thoughts, and how is our faith informing our thoughts and thereby ultimately informing our actions? So that's what we're going to be dealing with over the next 4 episodes. We have people from different skill sets in terms of understanding knowledge and faith that are going to talk to us. So I want to introduce today my brother, Adam Coleman, the real Adam Coleman. Like we was kind of talking about earlier, he's been rocking with the Unapologetically Black, Unashamedly Christian from the beginning. He was the first person that ever came to speak at our conference 4 years ago. This is our first official podcast, and he's our first on our first episode of our first official podcast. So I just appreciate this brother. This brother has been a friend. He's also been a brother to me personally, and definitely excited to hear what he has to say to us today. Recently contributed to a book that's been published, and I'll give him the opportunity to kind of talk about that a little bit too. So, man, Adam, why don't you just tell those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah, there you go, right there. That's it.
You turn the right way.
Yeah, turn it around. Yeah, that's it right there.
I'll get to
jewel. That is a jewel. You got to get that in your collection.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Here it is.
So, yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Well, unfortunately, man, you said I'm the real Adam Coleman. I'm actually the fake Adam Coleman. I'm stepping in for the real Adam Coleman today. I'm gonna do my best impression for y'all. You know what I mean? But but no, man. Yes, I'm Adam Coleman. Been doing apologetics for a couple of years now, man. I started out with the True ID podcast. Just True ID is the name of my ministry, True ID Apologetics Ministries. True ID stands for the Real You Imago Dei. Some years ago, I started the True ID podcast, basically just grappling with the kinds of questions that I know you're gonna knock out on this podcast right here. And as God was dealing with me and leading me in the right direction to the truth of the biblical worldview and how to defend it, I realized that I just couldn't keep it to myself, man. I had to share it. So that's how I started the podcast. And now I've got the True ID Apologetics YouTube page. I've got some new things coming down the pike. I've got the website up and running. I'll be posting more articles and things like that on there. So God is good, man. I started it as the True ID podcast, just me and a microphone and a computer. And now I actually have True ID Apologetics Ministries is an actual 501c3 ministry, man. So and God has been faithful in using it. And yes, I'm newly a published author. Thank God, man. We just dropped this book right here, Urban Apologetics, Restoring Black Dignity with the Gospel, edited by Eric Mason. I contributed a chapter to this right here, chapter 11, on the subject of Black atheism. So atheism in the African-American context, man. So, hey, I see my man Alfredo Valentin out there. Shout out to my dude, Alfredo. That's what's up. Y'all definitely check his channel out, man. BK Apologist, man. He's a great guy. But yeah, I'm thankful to be here with you, bro, man. You my brother, man. Like, I feel like I talk to you, just about every day. I mean, certainly, about once a week or so, you know what I'm saying? And, we came up together, man. We like, you know what I'm saying? We go back, man. We go back a ways.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Even back to the conferences in Philly, man. Man, the burger joint, man. What was that burger joint, man? Burger 5, man, or whatever it was.
Yeah, that joint was serious, man. That joint was see, Alfredo's gonna get me because I'm supposed to be vegetarian now, but I'm reminiscing, man, on that Burger 5, man. That joint was serious, man. That joint was serious. Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. But man, hey, brother, I want to get into it. Like, so the reason why I want to kind of just talk about like faith and reason today is sometimes what you encounter a lot of times is where people tend to think when they think in terms of faith and Christianity, sometimes believers and also non-believers tend to think that like our faith is just simply this blind faith, or more so, probably more so hopeful wishing, as opposed to what true biblical faith is. And so therefore it's like when they view Christianity, it's almost this kind of illogical framework, and that we don't derive to any of our understandings from using any type of logic. I remember a line from one of the Show Baraka songs, man. He said, he said, you're so open-minded that your brains fell out.
Yeah. So the brains fell out. Yeah.
And it's almost like that's how people kind of think in terms of like Christianity, that like, man, we're not using our brain when we're like wrestling or grappling through things about faith, which is as far as the thing from the truth when you really understand biblical faith and what the biblical faith requires. So, man, let's just kind of start off and just try to define, what is faith? When we say faith, what do we mean when we say faith?
That's good, man. That's good. I mean, and you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions about what faith is, and people pretty much render it in such a way that it does seem like it's antithetical to reason. At least in the popular culture, that's kind of how it's seen. And just kind of give a quick analogy. One thing I try to tell people to help to see kind of where I'm going here in a second is that, let's say, for example, you hit me up on the phone, man, and you asked me like, "Hey, man, how you feeling?" And I said, "You know what, man, I'm depressed. I'm feeling depressed." Right? If I were to say that to you, then you would think in your mind like, "Okay, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling down. Like maybe something has happened that has caused me to, feel some kind of way." Because that's typically the way that we use the term depressed. Like a kind of a sustained or deep sadness, right? Now, let's say that the next week I go to a therapist, right? And I'm sitting down talking to a therapist, and he says to me, "You're depressed," right? Now, that therapist is probably using the term depressed in a more specific way than you and I would in casual conversation. I'm saying when a psychiatrist says, "Hey, you're depressed, and I'm going to prescribe you this medication right here," they're talking about depression in a very specific sense, in a more professional sense. You know what I'm saying? They mean that you have some sort of chemical imbalance or some sort of degree or sustained depression that is beyond just merely, cheering up. You need some sort of additional assistance like therapy, medication, and so on and so forth. Right. So the way that we use words, sometimes there are words that we just kind of throw around, you know what I mean? But if we're trying to be precise, we've got to get down to, how particular, maybe particular usages of words, whether it be something that's particular to a profession or what have you. Now, such is the case when it comes to the word faith. Okay, because you're right. When people think of the word faith, they're really thinking of something like, kind of an unjustified hope, I'm saying, or like a blind faith or something to that extent. They may be thinking of something like believing without evidence or believing without good reason. That's kind of what they mean by faith. Okay. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of different directions we can go with that. And maybe we'll come back to it later. But when it comes to faith in a biblical sense, okay, now again, we're defending the biblical worldview. Okay. What do the Bible's authors mean when they use the term faith? Do they mean something analogous to blind faith or believing without evidence, or just kind of hope in a prayer, kind of in a very loose type of a sense? Is that what the biblical authors mean? Well, no, in the same sense that the psychiatrist is going to use the term depression in a very specific way, I'm saying, then more specific than what we use kind of in casual language. Likewise, when it comes to the word faith, the biblical authors are using the term faith in a more specific way than, something just kind of loosey-goosey, blind faith or what have you. So what we want to do is we want to take a look at what is it that the biblical authors have to say. So the word faith, if we're going to trace it back, we're tracing it back to the biblical authors, right? So we can get at what it is that we mean. It's going to, the word faith derives from the word fide. Fide is the Latin word from which, our word faith derives. Okay. Fide, fide. Now, fide simply means confidence. That's really, the gist of it. Fide refers to confidence. That's why the word confidence has it kind of stuck there in the middle. Con is a prefix, con, which means with, and then fide, and then that's the kind of like trust or what have you. You know what I'm saying? So fide, it means to have confidence. Anyway, but if we're going to get down to the biblical authors, we want to take a little step further, right? We want to go back to the Greek, and we want to deal with the Hebrew as well, because the New Testament is written primarily in Koine Greek. And then you have the Old Testament, which is written in primarily in Hebrew, right? Mm-hmm. So if we want to understand what these authors meant, we've got to do our due diligence to rewind the tape, linguistically, and get all the way back to the word that they would have used. Okay. Now in the New Testament, the biblical authors are going to be using the word pistis, for the word faith. Now, pistis can have a number of different usages. Okay, a number of different meanings, rather. And, so for example, it could mean, faith in the sense that we'll get into in a second, but it can also mean something like allegiance. It can mean something like, affirmation or what have you, like in an allegiance type of a sense. But we kind of want to target the way in which I think it's been misrepresented today. And so when we're talking about pistis, so what we're kind of building on, it really is the word. It boils down to trust. That's essentially what we're talking about there. Yeah, I'm saying pistis. It really just means trust, to trust in something, right? That's really what it means. Right. And so what we see is that it's not some sort of just flowery. Hey, I'm just kind of feel like I'm just gonna believe something indiscriminately. No, really, it's talking about trusting in something. And actually trusting in something for which you have good reason to trust. That's really what pistis gets down to. You know what I'm saying? So let me give you an example. All right. Let's think about Hebrews chapter 11. Let's think about Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Now, this is the word of faith, buzz scripture right here. Like you can't be in a word of faith church and not hear this one. They use it all the time, but they typically don't really break down kind of what it means. So, a lot of people probably know it, obviously. But Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 says, now faith is the substance of things. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I'll just leave it there, actually, because we can kind of go through the whole passage. But it says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, right? Now, I want you to think about the structure of Hebrews. Now, remember, the chapter divisions that we see in the scriptures don't come till far after the biblical text was written. That's something that has been put into the text for our convenience and, for the sake of referencing things, right? But if you really want to understand what's going on in Hebrews chapter 11, you've got to be able to look at the surrounding chapters and the overall book to see what's being taught there. Okay. Now, the destination, if you will, of Hebrews chapter 11 is Hebrews chapter 12. Okay. Hebrews chapter 12, ultimately what the author is trying to do is encouraging the believers that he's writing to stand up under hardship. I'm saying to stand up for the faith, to be able to endure hardship and to be able to press on in the faith. That's really what he's trying to get to. And Hebrews 11 is basically kind of setting up that piece of encouragement. Okay, now how does he set up that piece of encouragement? All right, well, Hebrews 11:1, going back to it again. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And then if you look at the chapter, the author then begins to give you a history lesson, right? He talks about, and actually I'll just kind of, point out a couple pieces so you can kind of see the flow of it. By faith, we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. Then verse 4, by faith, Abel offered a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. Verse 5, by faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death. Then you go about, 7, by faith, Noah, did such and such. And then verse 8, by faith, Abraham did such and such. So you can kind of see the flow that the author is starting from Genesis 1 and working his way through Hebrew history from Abel to Noah to Abraham to so on and so forth. And, then you eventually get to Moses, and he starts going down what we call, the hall of faith, if you will. I'm saying he's giving these guys a history lesson on all the different key figures of the old covenant who utilize their faith, who basically place their faith in God, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that he's presenting Hebrew history as evidence that God is trustworthy. Mm-hmm. That's really what he's doing. He said, you can see in the Old Testament that when this person had faith, God did this. And when that person had faith, God did that. And when this person had faith, this is, the miracle that happened, and so on and so forth. You know what I'm saying? You have these people who are exercising their faith through acts of obedience and then getting a result, right? And he's pointing out these different individuals so that he can get you to, the end of the chapter, and then flowing into chapter 12, where he's basically saying, okay, look, I've now presented you evidence of what the effects of faith are. I'm saying that you can see what God is like and what the kind of things that he does. Now, on the basis of this evidence, now you believe. You stand on the faith. I'm saying you don't be shaken, right? That's really what he's trying to do. So the idea of chapter 11 and chapter 12 taken together is on the basis of what we see God has done, have confidence in him, have trusted in him for what I'm saying he's going to do now and what he is going to do, moving forward. That's really what we're talking about there. Okay. So again, in this chapter, faith is not used as some sort of pie in the sky. Oh, I hope this is going to happen. No, he's saying, like, I'm giving you the evidence. Here's the historical evidence, right? And if given the historical evidence, this is what you can base your faith on. This is what you can base your trust on moving forward. Okay. So again, faith, pistis, has to do with trusting in someone or something for whom or for which you have good reason to trust it. And you see that with Hebrews chapter 11:1. That's how it's functioning. He's saying that you can trust in God right now to sustain you. Here's evidence in Hebrews chapter 11 to bolster your faith, right? To base your faith on, so that you can trust. That's what we're dealing with. Then we're talking about biblical faith. It's trusting in something or someone for whom or for which you have good reason to do so. So it's totally antithetical to this idea of just blind faith. You just stepping out, on whatever, with no good reason. That's just not what faith is, biblically speaking.
Right. Yeah. No, I think, man, you're right on it. I think, like, one thing that I want to emphasize here is the fact that, like, when we develop our understanding of what faith is, like, that's not even just something we grab out of the sky and say, okay, I'm going to define or determine what faith is. But when we're looking at it from the biblical standpoint of, okay, how does the Bible describe faith? And then now, how do I operate in terms of the boundaries in which the Bible has described faith? And it is important for us to make sure that we are, because the whole idea here is for us to be thinking biblically. And if we're going to be thinking biblically, then we have to have a high regard for the word of God. Saying it has to be sola scriptura. It has to be like, man, the scripture alone that is guiding our thoughts, even in terms of when we're thinking about faith. And whether you're looking at the Old Testament or the New Testament, in some places in the Old Testament, which will actually be translated trust, or the pistis in New Testament, it's all still centered around this idea of trust. And that faith also is this gift from God. So it's this is not just this hopeful wishing, but it is a trust that is ultimately built upon something, right? That's how we come to know and come to trust and come to believe God. And then thereby, that is what's guiding our thoughts. Now, of course, I'll go ahead.
Well, I just want to add to that too, because I think what happens is people want to kind of, spookify faith, if you will, and put it in this category that is somewhere on an island far away from knowledge and reason. You see what I'm saying? And I think what we have to understand is, now I'm going to throw in a philosophical word. You have this a branch of philosophy called epistemology. Okay, now epistemology is the study of knowledge in terms of what knowledge is and how we obtain it. Okay, now when you get into epistemology, they deal with sources of knowledge that can be there's discussion about what kinds of sources of knowledge should be regarded as meriting one's trust, if you will. Okay, like what kinds of sources of information will likely point you towards something that is true or real about the world, right? Now, some sources of knowledge, or actually probably the most common source of knowledge, would be testimony, right? I grew up believing that my name is Adam Coleman, right? I've never actually seen my birth certificate, not my original birth certificate. I could be, my name might be Jerome. It might be Tim Allison for all I know. You know what I'm saying? I've never actually seen it. You know what I'm saying? But nevertheless, on the basis of testimony, in terms of my parents telling me my name is Adam, my parents are a relevant authority who would be in position to know what my name actually is. I trust them. I trust their testimony, and I affirm that my name is Adam Coleman. I actually knew a guy. He actually, when he was like 23 or 24, he discovered, because he had been adopted, he discovered that his actual name was something totally different than what he'd been called his whole life. You know what I'm saying? The name on his actual birth certificate was something totally else. You know what I'm saying? But nevertheless, on the basis of, he still went by that name. You know what I'm saying? Because, those who were relevant to him at the time, that's what they call him. But my whole point is, there are all sorts of basic things that we believe on the basis of testimony. We do that all the time. That's a common form of knowledge. Another form of knowledge would be something like direct experience, right? I've directly experienced, I'm directly experiencing that I'm sitting in this chair right now, right? I can feel it, you know what I'm saying? I can feel it on my behind and what have you. I mean, I've got a good reason to think that I'm sitting, on this chair in, such and such Virginia, right? That's my direct experience. Now I can go further than that, but just when you think about in the biblical text, right? Think about somebody like Abraham, right? Now, if you just sit around chilling and the God of the universe shows up and starts and demonstrates and just starts talking to you, right? To where you realize like, oh snap, I'm having a real encounter with the God of the universe, right? That's a direct experience, right? You're having a direct experience of something real, right? And if this God, demonstrates, that he is who he is in whatever way, now you have a relevant authority, right? So you have a direct experience with a relevant authority, somebody who you would expect to know some things and be able to do some things. This is the Almighty God, right? So if that relevant authority that you're directly experiencing tells you, get up from your house and go such and such, go over to a place that I will show you, right? And you act on that. Yes, you're acting on trust, but what is that trust based in? Right? Because the Bible says that, that Abraham believed God and was accounted to him for righteousness. What is that act of trust of getting up and going to places that you know not of? That trust was based in a relevant authority that you had direct experience with, who gave you testimony of what it is that he wants you to do. Right? These are all forms of sources of knowledge that epistemologists, acknowledge are just basic to any knowledge that we obtain in the normal course of life. So I said that to say, if you look at how different people respond to God in the scriptures, right? They're not responding to God just on the basis of some, willy-nilly, I just hope everything's going to turn out all right. They're utilizing the same kinds of sources of information that anybody does in obtaining any sort of information. I'm saying, like, so again, faith is not something that's on this distant island away from knowledge and reason, so on and so forth. No, faith from a biblical standpoint utilizes the same epistemological resources that any other means of affirming something or attaining knowledge would. And so I think that what we have to do is help people to understand that, so they don't try to ostracize us way over there, like we just touchy feely or whatever. That's not what biblical faith is. And quite frankly, I think we have to bear some responsibility for that in the church, because we've actually taken that definition or that vibe when it comes to faith, and I think sometimes we project that to the world. We've got to get ourselves correct in terms of what faith means from a biblical standpoint, so that we're not projecting a false understanding of what faith is.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And just go even further with that in terms of like the biblical characters and what their faith was established on or built upon. So it is like in our lives as believers today. Like when we say that we have faith and we say that we're trusting in God, like I know that people bring kind of these obscure passages and stuff like that, and these maybe sensationalized moments, and they center that around like, okay, man, how can you believe that? Well, yeah, there are some things that seem to be outside the bounds of what we can just simply reason in our mind, like that, even though the resurrection. But even when you look at that, like that's not when you actually apply the certain principles to that, you see that it is more plausible that is a reality that actually happened, not just something we're hoping or wish that happened, right? But even to go even further in that, to realize that our faith is centered and based in like what is also can be, for the most part, factually known to be true. And when that happens, like some of the other things, like, man, like we're right now, I'm in a series of going through Jonah, and then everybody tends to think about Jonah in the belly of the whale, and is that plausible and can that happen? Well, if God is who he says that he is, then it's very well plausible that it can happen, right? And now, but these aren't the only instances in which we know God. We know God in other instances that he has known or shown himself to be true. and our trust on that authority and our trust upon who God is informs now the way that we think about not just certain particular instances, but it informs how we think about all instances. In other words, it's where we begin to develop our worldview and how we view all the world and all of life. And it's not based on we're not just based on hopeful wishing and hopeful thinking. When we come to passages like that, the thing that we begin to wrestle with is, well, is God who he says that he is? And if God is who he says that he is, then that is very well plausible that that can happen. And we look and we see his sovereignty over nature. We see a sovereignty over humanity. We see a sovereignty over our suffering. And it's not just wanting for it to be true. It is based off of evidence. And also, and I know this sometimes gets kicked out of the way, but I think you touched on it as well too. Also, our experiential evidence, like things that we've experienced in our personal lives that also help to inform the things that we also think through in the logical sense of engaging and knowing who God is, which is a gift that he has given to us in the first place. So you on mute, sir.
My bad. Yeah, I had some noise in the background, so I was trying to mute myself. But no, I mean, what you said is very important, though. Now, here's what's interesting. So again, reason and reasoning, you know what I'm saying, all these things are, if you're going to have a solid worldview, right, you want to have all the pieces of your worldview fit together in a way that aligns with the reality, you know what I'm saying, and doesn't conflict with one another. All right. Now, when it comes to this issue of reason in a secularist worldview, I think there's a tendency to centralize man when coming to understand like what reason is and how it functions. Okay. Now, what I mean by that is we have this tendency to think that, okay, well, you know, if we can't imagine that such and such is the case, or if we can't, you know, wrap our minds around it, then that means it's unreasonable or something like that. But that's just not true. If something is beyond our capacity to understand it, or it's beyond our, our imagination, that doesn't mean that it's logically impossible. It just means that it's beyond our capacity to understand it. That's all that means. Mm-hmm. But if that being said, if God exists, right, and God is a rational being, which he is in the biblical worldview, then reason has dimensions and degrees that, of course, would naturally extend beyond the capacity of finite man, right? So obviously, if you've got a God who can communicate something to you and say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, you know, it could very well be that in your finite capacity to reason, you may not be able to fathom how it is that God is going to bring about what he told you. Nevertheless, there's a higher source of reason. There's a higher reasoner, you know what I'm saying, who can see, you know, how it is what he's telling you is very rational and will work itself out. So we have to be careful. Now, I'm not saying that we need to just like throw our reason out the window or whatever, but we have to be careful not to centralize ourselves as being the sole, as if mankind is the sole authority of what is or isn't reasonable. I mean, the fact of the matter is we have a higher reasoner to look to in particular instances where certain aspects of reality exceed our ability to naturally discern them and understand.
Yeah, that's good, man. Absolutely. Now we've been talking about reason and logic and things of that sort. We kind of went through and you defined what faith is. We kind of fleshed out a little bit when you say reason or you're talking about logic. Like, let's kind of give a little bit of a definition of that, frame that up a little bit.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so again, one of the things I love about philosophy, people that know that I'm a philosophy head. One of the things that I love about philosophy is it's a study, a field that's centered around precision of language. You know what I'm saying? So, when you're using terms, you want to be very precise in how you're using them. And so, again, I'm going to kind of allude back to the analogy that I gave before about the psychiatrist using the term depression versus how we use it casually. There's more specific uses of that word depression than what we might just use in casual conversation. Likewise, when it comes to reason, I'm saying there's a more specific usage of that term and logic as well, you know what I'm saying, than what we might use casually. So usually when people think about reason, well, I mean, I think we're using it all different kinds of ways, but, to kind of center the conversation a little bit, when we're talking about reason here, I'm just going to kind of read off my notes. I'm talking about the faculty or process of drawing logical inferences. I'm saying the faculty or process of drawing logical inferences. You know what I'm saying? So we're thinking about basically, reality is what it is, right? And the faculty, the ability that we have, the capacity that we have to interpret information and data and evidence and form conclusions about the world as it actually is. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about reasoning. I'm saying that faculty and the process that we undergo when we're coming to conclusions about things as they actually are. That might be one way to look at it. Now, reason is going to employ something that also has a very specific definition, logic, right? And also it's going to utilize evidence and argumentation. Now, when it comes to logic, what we're thinking about is those principles and methodology of coming to right conclusions. Okay, logic has to do with the principles and methods that differentiate good reasoning from bad reasoning. That might be another way to look at it. Okay, and then so you have the three. I'll just say that the fundamental laws of logic. The law of non-contradiction, the law of the excluded middle, the law of identity. These are like fundamental laws. Of thinking well. So let me put it this way: when you think about a scientist, right, and they're in the lab, if they're going to come to some discovery about the world, one of the basically they're working with the laws of nature. The laws of nature are in place; it's outside their control, but they're working within the laws of nature essentially to understand nature, right? To understand the physical world as it actually is.
Right.
Okay, the laws of logic and principles like that function in critical thinking in the same way that the laws of nature function in the physical world, right? The laws of logic provide guidelines and parameters that will basically keep you in the ballpark in your critical thinking, such that you're more likely to arrive at the truth than not. That's kind of what the laws of logic will do. And so sound reasoning or reason is going to employ the principles and basic laws of logic. That's what it's going to do. Also, we're going to employ evidence. We want to have some sort of data, what I'm saying, some sort of something that makes the truth or falsity or the existence or non-existence of something more likely than not. That's basically what we're talking about when we're dealing with evidence. And then you want to combine logic and evidence, hopefully, into arguments, which are, where you kind of, put them together and you articulate, I'll just say you articulate points such that you want to direct people towards right conclusions. That's kind of what we want to think about when we're dealing with argumentation. And so when you kind of package all these different kinds of things together, and I can say, more about it, but when you package logic, evidence, and argumentation together, that's really kind of what we're talking about. And we were dealing with reason and reasoning, Now, here's the thing about it. Reasoning, again, is not something that's that doesn't fit well within the biblical worldview, right? Because number one, when we're talking about the object of reason, I'm saying, i.e., being truth and logic, when we think about that, God is the basis for that anyway. I'm saying, like, Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." But God is the ultimate reality. He is the very foundation of what is real. And given that he's a rational being, I'm saying, from eternity past, he has always in his mind had the laws of logic and all things rational within himself. I'm saying there's nothing that's logical or real or tending towards truth that isn't housed, if you will, within God. I'm saying we serve a rational God, a God who has the capacity for reason. Now, being that he's made us in his image and he's assigned us, to steward the creation in such a way that aligns with his nature and his will for mankind, or will for creation, more broadly, he's gifted us, endowed us with the capacity to reason as well. So we, when it comes to reason in the biblical worldview, it's a gift of God. That's what it is. It's one facet of what God has endowed us with, in that he's made us in his image. Reason allows for us to relate to one another. I'm saying, because I am able to reason, I can understand what you're saying right now. You can understand me. We can form relationships. We can form communities. There are rational processes in all those things. We can steward the earth. I'm saying the physical material that we've been charged to subdue here in the earth realm. We can do all those things because we have the capacity to reason, which allows us to interact with the world around us. All the rationality is a beautiful thing. Reason is a beautiful thing, and it's a gift of God. And again, faith employs reason. I'm saying it doesn't jettison reason. It's not contrary to reason. Faith employs reason. I'm saying, because if you don't have reason, then when God says to go do X, Y, and Z, or when God says that he's going to do something, right, there's no possible way for you to understand him if you don't have the capacity to, identify the truth or falsity of what he's saying, right? So in order to even trust in God, in order to even assess, like, so for example, we talked about Hebrews, chapter 11, right? If the audience and us today didn't have the capacity to identify the historical data that pointed towards God being trustworthy, if they weren't able to connect the dots between the actions of God and his trustworthiness, right? If they didn't have that rational ability, then Hebrews 11 would be just nonsense. There'd be no reason to even write it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So in order to even interpret the evidence that the author of Hebrews 11 is putting before them as reasons for their faith, they need reason in order to do that, right? So reason and faith are not contradictory, they're complementary, right? You need reason in order to develop the sort of trust that is what faith is constituted of. And so in the biblical worldview, far from being opposed to one another, reason and faith work together.
Right. Man, and there's so much, man, I want to respond to, man, of what you just said, man. But man, that was
what I can do, man. Yeah, you should have known, man. The first time I came to your church, it was like 2 hours and 45 minutes. So, this is the first podcast, man. I got like 3 more hours in me, dog. We can roll,
Yeah, we got to keep it rolling, but we'll go the whole 3. but like, for one, like, you mean to tell me that critical thinking is actually a part of our faith? That actually being a Christian employs the ability to think critically about what it is that we believe? Like, that what you're saying today?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll take it even further, right? It's actually when you look at the 2 great commandments that Jesus communicated, right? When he was talking like to the Lord, for example, he says, he affirms that to love God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength, right? That's the number 1 commandment. Well, you can't love God with your mind if you're entertaining thought processes that don't tend towards truth, because God is a God of truth. You see what I'm saying? Right. So if you have thought processes that are not oriented toward truth, then those thought processes are not, then your thought processes are not functioning in the way that aligns with God's nature. Okay. God wants us to function in our thinking in such a way that we tend towards truth, because that's where we find him. We're not going to find him in deception. Right. Mm-hmm. So again, loving God with your mind, right, is a command. It's not optional. Right. So, so let me put it this way. Critical thinking is not something for the unbeliever. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's not like, okay, well, they get to do the critical thinking and we just kind of touchy feely. No, nobody should be clearer thinkers than the people of God. Mm-hmm. Nobody should be clearer thinkers than the people of God. The people of God are commanded to love God with our minds, right? And you can't do that if your thought processes tend toward deception rather than truth. And so critical thinking is essential in our love walk, towards the Lord, and it's certainly essential in terms of carrying out the things that he called us to do.
Right, absolutely, man. And one thing you also said earlier, man, too, is like in terms of like the text that we have or the data that we're analyzing or beginning to think critically through. I think it's important also to highlight that in terms of our functionality as believers of how we're living out what we believe, and we're kind of we're thinking critically to those positions, and then we're acting out upon them or living out what we ultimately believe. We also have to realize that when it comes terms to understanding the text, that we're also employing critical thinking when we're actually engaging with the biblical text. I mean, one of the terms that we use is like hermeneutics, and it's like how we or exegesis, and it's just simply, these are just simply methodologies that cause us to engage with this particular text in some type of way. So we don't just go to a text because we don't want to do what we call eisegesis, where we read into the text what we want for it to say. In order for us to do that and to be faithful to the text, we have to employ those skills. And those skills are, once again, what you said, are a gift from God. And as being image bearers created in the image of God, there are certain communicable attributes that God has shared with those as we are image bearers. And one of those is because he is a reasonable, rational being, he has shared that with us, that we may be able to think critically about these things. And I would say, and you're more versed in this than I am, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, that in terms of we're ultimately trying to discover that which is true, like as we're thinking critically through something, like that's the avenue that is ultimately taking us to, right? And like you mentioned earlier about Jesus declaring who he is. So we employ those skills when we're in our studies. We don't just read a scripture and then just say, oh, well, this is what it means because I feel like that's what it means. But we're taking the time to really analyze that, to hear what it is that God is saying. And when we're doing that, we're employing those skill sets even in that, so that ultimately now we can know, because God has chosen, he has given us this text that we might know him. And then as we know him, and now we even go a little bit further to say that ultimately, like when we think of knowledge of God, yeah, we employ these like critical thinking ways or skills in the pursuit of knowing God as he has revealed himself to us.
That's right. That's right.
But then also when we think about knowledge of God, and you see this brought up in the scriptures of like the knowledge of God, or even Paul saying that, he count all of his successes as nothing, in order to know him, right? That this goes beyond just like facts or just things about God, knowing that, okay, I can know that God is sovereign. I can know that God is in control, right. and that is a fact that I know about him. Right. But ultimately, like this idea of knowing God, especially like with some of the Hebrew language of yada and knowledge and knowing, was centered around like this intimacy with God. So like these facts that I know about God that he's allowing for me to know about him ultimately are bringing me into a intimate relationship with him, in the same way that they use the word for a man and his wife, like Adam knew Sarah. What is the highest form of knowing someone in intimacy is the way that Adam would know Sarah, or the way that a husband would know his wife, or the way that a wife would know her husband. So that ultimately, as we're thinking critically and we see this, I don't even know if I want to actually use the term intersection of faith and reason. I don't know if they intersect or if they're parallel riding down the same road. I don't know what would be a better definition of that.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. I guess they, they definitely work together. Intersect versus running parallel. Yeah, well, I think they're both guiding us toward truth. I mean, that's for sure. You know what I'm saying? One in some instances employs the other. But to your point, though, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. So now here's the thing. I'm gonna go back to epistemology for a second, because in the study of knowledge, we understand that there are different types of knowledge. Okay. Now, in the most basic sense, some people will parse it out different ways, but I tend to just use three branches because it's easy for me to understand. But you have what's called experiential knowledge, right? You have knowledge by, or we can call it knowledge of acquaintance, right? Some direct experience. Then you have propositional knowledge. So that's going to be like your book knowledge, like what you're talking about as far as like knowing the facts about something. That's that propositional knowledge. And then you have procedural knowledge. Okay. So procedural knowledge would be like, knowing how to ride a bike, kind of like the knowing how to do something, knowing how to shoot a basketball. That's what when you're talking about procedural knowledge. Okay. So you got experiential knowledge, propositional knowledge, and procedural knowledge. Now, all three forms of knowledge play a role in how we relate to God, right? Because God has, through his special revelation, obviously through the scriptures, I'm saying in man's fall, and this God has provided propositional knowledge through his special revelation, the scriptures, so we can know things about him that way. But at the same time, we also have the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, by which we have access to God, and so we can relate to him every day of the week. We're always in a position where we can directly experience God. Some of us may have had some miraculous experiences where we've seen God show up in a certain way, where we're like, man, I know that God did X, Y, and Z. That's your experiential knowledge. Maybe you had a financial difficulty or a physical difficulty, and God healed you or God provided for you. And now you have this propositional knowledge that God is a provider, right? So your experiential knowledge has contributed to your propositional knowledge. And at the same time, your propositional knowledge, but having a right understanding of who God is, puts you in right position to have the experiential knowledge. But then there's also the procedural knowledge, because every day we're working with the Holy Spirit in this process of sanctification, right? We're coming to know how to rightly walk with God, how to walk in integrity, how to, defeat lust, how to, keep your prayer life right, or whatever it may be. You're constantly, developing in areas to know how to walk with the Lord. So you got procedural knowledge, propositional knowledge, and experiential knowledge all working together to, in terms of how we engage God and come to know him.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
I'm gonna be super unprofessional right now. I forgot to plug in my computers. I just need to do that right quick.
Yeah, no, you're good.
I didn't mean to lean away from the camera. My bad.
Yeah, no, while you're doing that, see, I'm actually rocking one of the True ID
yeah, see, bro.
man.
Right. Okay.
Hey, so actually, what we want to do is actually want to give just celebrate, just appreciating y'all hopping on and things of that sort. And man, share this if you're in, share this, across your social media platform. But also just out of appreciation, we want to give one of these away. I want to give one of these True ID long sleeve tees away. Also in support of our brother as well too. And we also want to give away a copy of the Urban Apologetics book to somebody that's in tonight.
Hey,
if you want to be in that drawing to get one of those t-shirts and one of those or one of those books, all you gotta do is just type "let me get that" in the comment section, and we'll choose somebody out of the comment section so we know that you're in here, and we'll get your information. We'll inbox you after we choose whoever the winner is, and you'll get one of these True ID t-shirts, and then somebody else will also get a copy of the Urban Apologetics book as well too, which Brother Adam Coleman is a contributor in that book, and he wrote on Black atheism. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, put that up. And listen, whether you win this in the raffle or not, if you already got one, it's cool. Like getting the raffle and then give it away to somebody. But that's a fundamental work that is necessary and needed. And if you haven't, make sure that you get that. All right, make sure that you get that. So
yeah, buddy. Oh, interestingly enough, somebody asked a question. I think might be helpful. I think Finding Truth asks, what's the relationship? Oh, my bad, man. This is your show, man. I'm messing up, man.
Go ahead. Go ahead. If you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat. So, yeah, you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah. So he asks, what's the relationship between reason / logic and God? Do they exist necessarily? I love this question because I can tell this is somebody who reads philosophy. So, because so let me start from the back end of that. When he says, do they exist necessarily? Well, in the Urban Apologetics book, Restoring Black Dignity with the Gospel, in my chapter, I give an argument, what's called the argument for contingency. So actually, if you're using that term, you probably know what that is. But actually, I give an argument as to how it is that we can know that God is indeed a necessary being, right? So a necessary being, you broadly speaking, you got like two types of things that can exist. You have things that are necessary, which means that they must exist. There's no way that they could possibly not exist. And then you have other things that are called contingent things, and those are the kinds of things that they may exist, but they didn't necessarily have to. So, for example, like this computer that I'm on right now, I mean, it could be that it was never created, or me. Maybe I could have never been born. It's logically possible that contingent things could not exist. So I would take it that God is a necessary being. I think that God, there's various different arguments that we could give for that, but I would take it that God for certain exists, and maybe we could say in all possible worlds. There's no way that reality could be that God wouldn't be in the mix. I'm saying God is going to exist in any way possible way that reality could be. So with that being said, the relationship between God and reason, I think there's different ways that people can approach this. There's different models that people can use to clarify the way in which God and reason exists. Now I don't want to go too far in the weeds, but one of the things that we want to make sure that we uphold is God's aseity. Okay, God. There's nothing outside of God, I'm saying, that informs him or that he depends on or anything like that. So if you have like reason and logic outside of God, from a biblical worldview, that's not going to work. I'm saying that would be problematic. So how is it? Where do we situate logic and reason in light of the existence of God? And I would say that logic and reason are eternal aspects of God's mental life, if you will. I'm saying, God has always existed. There's no way that he cannot exist. And, logic and reason, whatever they may entail, whether it be mathematics, logical inferences, the laws of logic, those things have always been present in the mind of God. Now, another way you could look at it would be to say that logic and reason point to reality, right? Even mathematics, I'm saying the number one, points to something, that's real. I'm saying, or is corresponds to something that's real. And in so much as God is the ultimate reality, the laws of logic, point to him. I'm saying they are derivative in the sense that they are maybe explain or point to God in some sense or another. So there's different ways you can go about it. But to put it simply, I believe that God has always existed, and there's no possible way that he could not exist. No matter which way reality would have turned out, God would be there. And the laws of logic and all logic and reason have always been in God's mind. That's kind of how I see those things fitting together. Sorry to get in depth, but it was actually a pretty deep philosophical question, so I kind of had to answer it that way. I apologize.
No, that's good, and that's helpful. So yeah, absolutely, man. And that's what we want to do too. Is if somebody has a question and things of that sort, we want to make sure that we try to take adequate time to, we have limited time, but take adequate time to respect the person's question and give them a thorough answer. You never know, like what, and that's the whole point. You never know what questions people are maybe they're particularly wrestling with, or maybe someone that they know are particularly wrestling with. And if at
you never know,
yeah, what I'm saying, like you have an opportunity to have, and one of these soon I will also be sharing my story of just kind of things that I wrestled with. So like I have definitely a heart for somebody who like has a legitimate question and wanted to have that question answered. So
well, and that's the exciting thing about it, man. Your story and mine are very similar in that way, because and I don't want to like spoiler alert or whatever, but I'll just say for me, these are the kind of things that I wrestle with. Like I'm just by nature, I can't just go with something just because. I'm naturally inquisitive. And so if I have a question, if I've got something that's kind of not sticking right with me, I've got to go seek out the answer. That's just kind of how I'm wired. You know what I mean? So for me, getting into apologetics and then, and philosophy more broadly, hey, thanks. Appreciate it. But, getting into these things, this has been an aspect of my walk with God. I'm saying like this, is a part of my devotional life, asking, questions and seeing him come through with answers. That's part of how, I've been able to grow closer to God, and just kind of know him more rightly. Oh, okay, that's dope. That's what's up. That's what's up. I see that. That's what's up. Glad people feeling it. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for us to be able to, to take the time to. I think it's part of our care for each other. Is like, and when you've been in a position of like sitting in that place, man, you know what it is.
Yeah.
And one of the things, man, because you got to mention in the book, and there's somebody that you mentioned in the book as well too. And one thing that I also want to highlight is, and I really don't want to spend a lot of time, particularly on the statement that I'm about to make, that people tend to look at Black Christians as being anti-intellectual, and I'm just mentioning that for what I'm about to say, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. And the reason why I don't is because, man, we have the time and energy to do what we're doing, and people gonna believe what they can believe whatever.
They're gonna believe what they believe, right?
And I'm not saying that those things shouldn't be addressed, but I'm saying like just for where we're at right now, like that is what it is. But the point of being unapologetic Black and unashamedly Christian is also to highlight the fact that, man, and it's not new. You know what I'm saying? It's not new that people who have the same skin tone as us, it's not like we just started thinking. You know what I'm saying? Like that's not the case.
Right.
We do want to highlight the fact of like, and that's why we're doing this in terms of thinking biblically, and now as we're talking about reason, and then later on we'll talk about the need for to have a clear view of doctrine and theology. And then we'll also get down to the way that the Black church has always functioned in this arena. But those sometimes the methods were not the same as others. It's kind of been dismissed. And then in our last episode, we're going to talk about this in terms of academia and how this works within the realm of academia, being Christian as well too. So we want to kind of hit all of those different spheres of this idea of thinking biblically.
I mean, that's good, man, because I mean, cut you. I'm sorry.
No. I was actually going to pass it back off to you anyway. So
man, I was going to say that's good, because I do think that there are a lot of misconceptions about the Black church in terms of this misnomer of being anti-intellectual. So again, going back to what I was talking about with epistemology, there being experiential knowledge, procedural knowledge, propositional knowledge. We tend to associate intellect with propositional knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. With that being said, you can still pursue truths, whether it be through experiential knowledge or procedural knowledge. Now, the reality is when you have a people group, i.e. African Americans, who are literally barred from propositional knowledge. They're barred from education, right? Up until the 60s. We're talking about seminaries still not letting black folks in the door. You know what I'm saying? And maybe into the 70s or whenever. I mean, like, you know, the history of the black church is growth in the face of being prevented from accessing propositional knowledge about the faith, right? Now, the reality is, I love propositional knowledge. Y'all know I'm a philosophy head, right? But propositional knowledge can only get you so far when that bullwhip is hitting you on the back, right? It can only get you so far when you go to the polls and you can't vote, and, you know, at the expense of possibly losing your life or whatever it may be. You know what I'm saying? You need some experiential knowledge. You need to know God. You know what I'm saying? You need a direct experience with the Most High God to be able to endure under the kind of heinous circumstances that the black church has been forged in, right? You need some experiential knowledge. You need procedural knowledge. You need to know that I can operate in integrity. You know what I'm saying? I can apply the biblical truths about both forgiveness and justice, right? And not resort to violence, because, you know, in such in a vindictive sort of a way, I can apply those truths. I can excel at learning how to do that and gain that procedural knowledge, you know what I'm saying, and expect to see God come through on my behalf. That's what the civil rights movement was all about, is applying biblical truths, right, and seeing a just outcome. That's what happened there. I'm saying that takes some procedures out. They had to know something, and they had to put that thing into practice, right? And so we have always been pursuing truth in the black church. I'm saying whether it be experientially or whether it be procedurally, but at the same time, it's evident that once we had the opportunity, I'm saying, listen, you can't read through it, and shout out to Isaiah Robinson. You can't read through the history of the AME church, for example, without seeing an emphasis on academic excellence. You know what I'm saying? And the pursuit of education. You can't read through it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's impossible, right? I don't know. I mean, look, I grew up in the church. You know what I'm saying? I grew up in a church down here in the South. You know what I'm saying? What black church didn't have a scholarship fund? Right. You know what I'm saying? I don't care if that church had 5 members, they was going to have a scholarship fund. You know what I'm saying? Like they was going to send somebody to school. If they didn't have but one youth in the congregation, if you was going to school, somebody was going to put some money on your lunch book. Somebody was going to, you know, give you a donation for something. They was going to pass that plate around to make sure you got off to school all right. You know what I'm saying? The black church has never been anti-intellectual. And I don't care. I'm on your show, so I'm not going to name names. But individuals who are in the public square and have these platforms where they say otherwise don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. So, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Shout out to Zion McGregor as well, too. Also a contributor to the Urban Apologetics book as well, too, man.
Bless Fire chapter, absolutely.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
absolutely.
Shout out to Zion, man. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the reality. That's the reality of it. The reality of it is, like I say, it's not that we're just coming to some level of knowledge. And then also, and I don't want to go too far into this because I think we're getting I'm going a little bit off topic here. But in terms of, because of our experiential like knowledge of God, like that is reflective also in like the songs that we sing that oftentimes are dismissed as being not as theologically deep or things of that sort, because of, you know, it, but it is centered around like this experiential knowledge that we have and that we have known with God, you know what I'm saying? Like, which actually shows some very depths of God, beyond him just being hills and valleys and, you know what I'm saying, and things. Not to say that he can't be described in those ways, but it's also not to dismiss the fact that from our experiential knowledge, like we do know that we have a testimony because we know of a sovereign God who has kept us in spite of what it is that we have experienced. And we can look back over our lives. And that's why we say, man, I look back over my life, I have a testimony, right? Because why do I have a testimony? I have a testimony not simply because I overcame. I have a testimony because there was a sovereign God who was above and beyond all things, and that I see his providential hand guiding in the midst of all tragedy. And I have a theology of suffering that just because I've brought it down to a couple words to say I have a testimony does not mean that I do not know or do not understand who God is, but it is through perhaps maybe my experience, and I forgot the other form of knowledge that you said, propositional knowledge. Procedural knowledge. That will be informed. My experiential knowledge will be informed by that, but those two things are not opposite one from another. So not to think that there is some lack of theological depth. And then even besides that, like that's part of our makeup as a people group anyway. But don't discredit the fact of like that there are still people who are also still putting in work in this propositional knowledge.
Of course.
Right now, today.
Man, let me tell you something, man. I challenge anybody to go back and read Richard Allen. Go back and read Absalom Jones. Read Frederick Douglass, brother. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I challenge anybody who has anything to say about the intellectual history of the Black church, or according to them, lack thereof. Go back and read Henry Highland Garnett. Just read the speeches, brother. Hey, look, I love this book right here. Everybody did an excellent job, and I mean, phenomenal job. But fam, for real, when I was writing my chapter, I was trying to keep up with our forefathers who came 150 years before us. Because I read this stuff all the time. You know what I'm saying? And when you look at what our ancestors, go back and read what's my brother Grimke. You know what I'm saying? Talk about that, man. Look, we've been doing this. We not new to this, dog.
Right.
We not new to this. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that has to be recognized. I know you don't want to go too far afield on that, but there is a rich intellectual history in the Black church. You know what I'm saying? And don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And shout out and then brother Vince Bantu, he's going to be on, and we're going to be talking to him. And man, shout out to Meacham, John Amir Meacham as well too. And and then that's where the Meacham School of Hymeno actually comes from, is from them. So like, man, there's so much rich history that's out there that refutes that. And in terms of, I want to throw this in here too, that it wasn't a lack of critical thinking in their experience either. Right. Oh, so, man, and I think sometimes because we're so familiar with people, like whether it be a Damon Richardson or Bantu or Esau McCauley, I mean, because they might jump on a live or something like that, we're so familiar with them. It's quite frankly, I think sometimes we lose sight of how these dudes are brilliant. Like, Vince Bantu can do a whole lecture like off the dome. You know what I'm saying? Like, this cat, like, he's not, he's no joke. I've seen him do it. You know what I'm saying? I've seen him, give that sort of in-depth. Damon Richardson the same way. I've seen him do it. The stuff that he breaks down online and stuff like that. I've seen him do it in person, off the dome. You know what I'm saying? He's really like that. I'm saying Eric Mason. Shout out to Zion McGregor. He probably will feel bashful about me saying this. He's a brilliant brother. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not just saying that because I know these people. What I'm saying is, I think because we see them and because like they're so common to us, that we lose sight of how brilliant these individuals are. You know what I'm saying? Like, we are Black history. This is what we do. Real rap. You know what I'm saying? And so I think we have to appreciate it. Black intellectualism is a now thing in the church. You know what I'm saying? Today. You know what I'm saying? And I think that it's growing. I believe in God that it will just catch fire. Right. Yeah. Shout out to Dwayne, man. I see you, man, brother. Another Tamahari, another student at Meacham School of Hymeno, and this brother's brilliant as well too. Like when it comes to like history and early African history.
Absolutely.
And we definitely gonna have to get Dwayne. We got to get together and get on here and chop it up one day. When it comes to like early African, like this brother is brilliant. Like he's phenomenal with it, and so that's what we want to just spend this time like to talk about these things and to get kind of into the weeds of some of the definitions and things of that sort.
Yeah.
But ultimately also to say, listen, it's not like we're taking our brains out and then saying, okay, listen, this is what it takes to be a Christian. I think I've seen a meme like that one time, like it was people getting their brains taken out and going to church. You know what I'm saying? Like this is the farthest thing from the truth, but also to highlight the fact of like, that is broader than just like you talked about the different forms of knowledge and how we derive the knowledge. It's also broader than that as well. It's broader than just maybe one avenue in which we come to know and to understand things. Like there's different ways that we come to know and understand things as well.
Absolutely.
But however it may be, it is not the fact that we are taking, it's not, I mean, because people like when we start to get down a little bit further, then people start asking, how can you be, Christianity was beaten into us during slavery and things of that sort, which that's a whole nother thing to talk about. Right. But I think also what that implies to, when you say that to me, what that implies to me, you're implying that I haven't thought through my faith. You're implying that I haven't critically engaged with my faith, nor have I critically engaged with history, and I'm just blindly following this slave religion that was beaten into our ancestors. That's what it ultimately implies. So listen, that's not the reality of it all. You know what I'm saying? That's not the reality. Not only is that not the reality of it all, that's not the reality at all.
No, it's not, man. Absolutely, bro. I mean, yeah. And I think that's, I mean, ultimately you're talking about the genetic fallacy, which is, where you, well, one of the ways you can engage in the genetic fallacy is to deny a position or view based upon how somebody came to believe it. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. How I come to believe something or affirm something is independent as to whether or not what it is that I affirm is true. You know what I'm saying? Those are two different things. And so I like to put it out like, I'm as appalled by slavery as anybody. You know what I'm saying? I think it was, as heinous as can be. You know what I'm saying? But regardless of, whatever happened during the slavery times, you know what I'm saying? Jesus Christ died on the cross and rose from the grave. And I have evidence to suggest that he did. You know what I'm saying? I have evidence that, the God of the Bible is real. And that evidence traces far, far further back than these slave masters who did what they did 2,000 years after the cross. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I mean, I think what we have to do is remember that again, yes, you're right. It's regardless of what happened during slavery, that doesn't mean that I haven't thought through my faith. Number one. Number two, actually, I think it does a disservice to our African ancestors who actually lived through chattel slavery. Because the fact of the matter is, listen, we're talking about, man, people don't realize that the literacy rate, you know what I'm saying? Excuse me, the illiteracy rate among African enslaved persons plummeted within a generation after slavery. I'm talking about from the time they get off the cotton field to the time that we're down to about maybe between, I say 20, 25% illiteracy in our community was like really on like one generation. We came off the plantation hungry to learn and exercising our rational faculties such that we were able to just literally just decimate the illiteracy rate, you know what I'm saying, in our community. And on top of that, I'm saying during the period of Reconstruction, we see people literally coming out of slavery. Some of them ended up in Congress and various different elected positions down, all throughout the South and so on and so forth. We came out ready, you know what I'm saying, ready to prosper, ready to, and by prosper, I don't mean just materially, but educationally. You know what I'm saying? We were ready to learn. We were ready to grow as people. And so I think that when people just kind of play it off as this African enslaved person was just these brainwashed, dumb, couldn't do no better than be, mentally subjugated by the slave master, that just does such a heinous disservice to our African ancestors. And I say all the time, like don't trample on our ancestors for the sake of your own rebellion against God. Right. If you're gonna rebel against God, then just do that on your own 2 feet. You know what I'm saying? But you don't have to trample under our ancestors just to prop up your rebellion against God. You know what I'm saying?
Man, absolutely, man. Absolutely, man. I agree 100%, man. We have another question here. Says, do you think that the misconception that people have about intellectualism in terms of the church goes beyond minorities, but the church overall, is the church to be blamed? Misunderstanding of faith.
I guess in reference to the misunderstanding of faith, I mean, I do think that this issue about what faith is and how it functions, blind faith, this, that, and the third, I mean, I certainly believe that goes beyond minority communities. Unfortunately, I think it's just an idea that's swirling about in the culture in general and has been for quite some time. And I guess, you might argue that this notion kind of may trace back to the secular Enlightenment period over there in the, even before America was founded. You know what I'm saying? This notion that there's a separation to be made between spiritual authority and reason, or faith and reason, taking it back to the Enlightenment period. But anyway, I do think that it goes beyond minority communities. Is the church to be blamed? Yeah, partly. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I mean, anytime we mishandle our worldview, then we open the door for other people to misinterpret it and to approach it in the wrong kind of a way. So I mean, I think we do have to bear some responsibility in terms of our role that we played. On top of that, I mean, I think he asked in regards to misunderstanding faith, which is what we're talking about here. I do think that we bear some responsibility on that. Now, I think what's very interesting though is that when it comes to comparing the biblical worldview and another worldview, say, for example, like what we might refer to as naturalism or materialism. Some people commonly refer to it as atheism, though there's different shades of that. But basically, if God exists and God is a rational being, and he's the one that's responsible for all of creation, then it's not really a too long of a leap to see how it is that somebody like myself or Tim or any of us who have these rational capacities, how it is that we exist. You know what I'm saying? The fact that we can reason flows pretty smoothly from the fact that we come from a God who can reason and has endowed us with the ability to do so. That makes a lot of sense. So when people lob that, the notion that there's this separation between faith and reason at us, I think they don't know the biblical worldview very well. But ironically, I think that if you take God out of the picture, if the physical world is all there is, as many atheists claim, and while they're calling us, stupid and unreasonable, I think actually if you take God out of the picture, then you pull the rug from under any justification that can be brought about to explain why it is that any of us have the ability to reason. I'm saying I'll put this in a snapshot real quick, but let's just think about, let's say if God doesn't exist, and just the only thing that exists is the physical world, right? If that's true, then we can trace the history, if you will, of the physical world back to, let's just say, the Big Bang. I'm saying one way or the other. It's at some point the universe comes into existence. According to them, say be like 14 billion years ago or so. And if that's the case, again, the only thing is this is a physical universe, and it tracks back to the Big Bang. Then everything that's happening in the physical world right now is like a domino effect that traces back to the Big Bang. It's just physical happenings that have no rhyme or reason in and of themselves, other than they are the fallout, the kind of domino-like fallout from that initial event that we call the Big Bang. Now, here's the problem. If we don't have souls and we're just physical beings, right? And the mind is nothing more than the physical brain, and the brain is physical and is basically moving about, and the things that's going on in the brain are results of the Big Bang in a domino-like fashion, just like everything else in the physical world, then all of my thoughts that I'm having are products of this domino-like effect of determinism that flows back to the Big Bang. And I don't have any control of it. I'm not really thinking. I'm not of my own will anyway. I'm saying everything that's happening in my physical brain is a result of just physical atoms and electrons or whatever, just buzzing about, moving in a domino-like way, going back to the Big Bang. Now, if that's true, then I think you remove all justification for saying that we have the capacity to reason, because all our whole mental lives are nothing but just the falling of those physical dominoes. I'm saying, like, we're just, we have this delusion that we have rationality, but there's really no good reason to think that all of our thoughts are anything more than just this deterministic falling of the dominoes. Exactly, determinist. That's somebody who reads a lot. That's somebody, exactly where I'm going. So again, I think that's where you have, on this naturalistic scheme, I don't think that they have justification to affirm rationality. There's different ways that we can go there. We can talk about evolution as well, which I'm sure he's probably familiar with, the EAAN. But that being said, I think the biblical worldview provides a solid foundation or framework for explaining why it is that we have rational beings like such as ourselves that exist. Whereas I think that the naturalistic worldview doesn't have the wherewithal or solid framework to be able to explain why it is that rational beings like us exist.
Mm-hmm. Bars.
Hey.
Bars. I was saying, so in that reality, we have the ability to think, but not the ability to reason.
Yeah, and our thinking would just be just those dominoes. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's just stuff popping about, in our physical brains, if that's the case, And like I said, we can add even another layer. We can go straight Alvin Flanagan with it. Evolution, I think, is doesn't really give us too many prospects in terms of bringing about rational beings. But that probably would take us a little bit further down the road. But there's various different reasons why I think that the idea of us having this mental life, this rational mental life, just doesn't fit well on a naturalistic paradigm. Whereas again, the biblical worldview affords it. As a matter of fact, I got to do it again.
Yes, sir.
Apologetics, restoring Black dignity with the gospel. I actually touched on that very briefly in my chapter, Zera Yaakov, that you mentioned, that you alluded to earlier, where in addition to explaining how it is that if you have this rational being, i.e. God, who creates everything, then that gives a good explanation as to how rational creatures like us could exist. But he also gives a purpose-related justification for the fact that we have reason, in so much as it goes back to what you're saying before, the fact that we have reason, we can relate to God. You know what I'm saying? Reason is a faculty that we have that allows us to relate to God, which is the ultimate end of man. You know what I'm saying? So he gives a couple of different reasons as to why rationality exists, and that's just one of them.
Right. Yeah, and we get ready to kind of wrap it up, man. Like this has been, man, so good, man. Like, and like, man, we're gonna continue this conversation. So I want to say,
Yes,
one,
sir.
make sure you follow True ID Apologetics. Make sure you follow them on YouTube. If you aren't already following them, look them up. Follow them on Facebook as well too. The website you said the website is up and going.
Yeah, trueideaapologetics.com.
All right, check them out, trueideapologetics.com. Make sure you follow wherever you can see Adam at. Make sure you follow him there as well too. Make sure you grab the book, Urban Apologetics. Make sure you get that in your collection. That is something that you need. I think that's something that needs to be in the hands of all people, like regardless of your background, believers, unbelievers, no matter your nationality. I believe everybody needs to have that book in their hands. And we're gonna give away one of these T-shirts, just as appreciation. Wish we could give away one to everybody, but we're just not able to do that. But give away one of these T-shirts and also give away one of these books. And if you want to be a part of that, just type "I want that" in the chat, and then we'll make sure to as we find somebody, we'll get your information. We'll get that stuff mailed out to you. But I do want to shout out. Hey, what up, V? I see you in the building. Says VV. Also, I want to just real quickly just kind of touch on a little bit of highlighting Zara Yacob and his wrestle and understanding. If you could just tell us, I know there's a lot that we can get into of that, but pretty much in the beginning part of the wrestle that he had and how he began to wrestle and try to work through and understand who God is. If you could just kind of keep on, because we got you're going to read the book for the rest of it, but
you got to get the book. You got to get the book.
But if you could just because I think that's interesting, and especially in terms of his background as a philosopher and what he wasn't influenced by and coming to that understanding. So you could just highlight some of that for us.
Yeah, give it over. Yeah. So Zara Yacob is a 17th century Ethiopian philosopher. Okay. And just real quick, one of the reasons why I felt like I was important to include him in what I was doing as I was kind of bringing this chapter together is typically when somebody's going to give you like a history of say the cosmological argument or whatever apologetics or philosophical argument, if they're going to kind of review the history of it, they're going to talk about some of the key philosophical players that advance that argument, and maybe kind of put their own spin on it or whatever. And so, for example, when it comes to what's called cosmological arguments or first cause arguments, typically, in your average apologetics work, they'll mention people like Al-Ghazali, who was a Muslim philosopher. They'll mention Thomas Aquinas. They mention Aristotle and Plato, and they'll kind of give you a timeline of people who have made the argument. Leibniz. But Zara Yacob is, as far as I've seen, I've never seen Zara Yacob's name included in that list. But he indeed made a cosmological argument in his works, and I think that it is certainly noteworthy given the fact that he did so in a piece of Ethiopian history, which was pivotal, in terms of particularly, in terms of value in the philosophical tradition of Ethiopia. So anyway, with that being said, Zara Yacob was, again, the 17th century philosopher. He comes along during a time where there's a lot of conflict, religious conflict in Ethiopia. You have the Portuguese who had established trade relationships with Ethiopia. And so there's some cultural interaction going there that's kind of bringing about even more turmoil. And the long and short of it is he was actually under threat of his life, for some of his views. Some people was hating on him. So basically some dude lied on him to the king, and his life was in danger. So to escape, he ended up secluding himself in a cave for about 2 years. And so during this time, he's just really contemplating life. And I mean, as you imagine, he had a lot of time to think, living in a cave by himself. And he was just really grappling with just some of the real existential questions about what about the problem of evil, and why is there evil in the world, particularly the evil that people do to one another. What is the role of reason, and is there a God? That was among some of the questions that he asked. Interestingly enough, and I'll make this real quick, but typically you don't really see the question of God's existence coming up in what might be described as the philosophical works of people at least in the African-American tradition, what I'm saying? And even in the African tradition, because it's, we are just a God-fearing people. I mean, like we believe in God. That's generally taken as a given, what I'm saying? So it's somewhat unusual to see somebody like Zara Yacob, posing that question and then feeling the need to give a response to it. But, for that reason, I felt, again, it was important for people to see that, because as he's grappling with the existence of God in light of the evil that he's seeing in the world, I feel like there's a parallel that people can sense, even in our own experience here. Like when people struggle with, well, if God exists, then why slavery, or why are people downtrodden, and so on and so forth. Well, Yaakov was grappling with those same kinds of things. And in the midst of doing so, he applied argumentation and reason to, point toward, what, there really is a God. And I kind of outlined some of the reasons and arguments that is in his work called the Hatadah, which was basically a written down of his kind of diary / reflections after he come out of the cave. One of his students put his works or his thoughts in a book. It's called the Hatadah. And so I had a copy of that, and try to basically draw from his work, man, and employ it today. That's kind of how that worked out.
Yeah, good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Hey, we're gonna get ready. We're gonna get ready to wrap it up. I'm gonna Find the Truth has another question that I would like to give to you, and then we'll answer that, and we'll get ready to wrap it up, man. Appreciate you, man. Man, coming on, like I say, man, the first speaker at the Urban excuse me, I'm about to say Urban Apologetics.
I see you messing up too, man. It's not just me.
I mean,
it's not just me.
Listen, no, Urban Apologetics is just so deep in my mind, man. Like,
oh yeah, because man, you know what, man, with this book, bro, I'm telling you, man, I almost caught me a gold chain. I was gonna just wear this as a medallion. I was gonna wear the book around my neck, man. You know what I'm saying? Urban Apologetics for real, bro.
Right, man.
On the chain.
Well, yeah, he was first. Yeah, the first speaker at the first Unapologetically Black Unashamedly Christian conference, man, and still 4 years later, man, still rocking, man, and willing to be a part and take time, man, from your family and stuff to come be a part, man. So like, we definitely appreciate that, man. Yeah, I want to. So the question is, do Kierkegaard's idea play some role as far as what the understanding of faith is for some people?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So one of the things as an apologist, I'm committed to not acting like I know stuff that I don't know. So I'm just gonna say, I don't know. I got to really think about it. Funny enough. So I've got like this list of authors and theologians and thinkers that I put in what's called the Aquinas category. You know what I'm saying? So Thomas Aquinas was a thinker from the medieval period, particularly in the Catholic tradition. He's appealed to philosophically. I mean, he was a genius, really. But he's hard to understand, at least for me. You know what I'm saying? And so he's one of those people that I'm going to get around to eventually. So Kierkegaard is another one of those people who I put in the Aquinas category. I'm saying Kierkegaard, Hegel, you know what I'm saying? Maybe some others as well. I just really haven't read a whole lot on Kierkegaard. So I'd just say maybe possibly that's the case. I really just don't know.
Gotcha. Cool. Hey, once again, I want to thank everybody for hopping on and hanging out with us today, for taking time out of your day to hop on and be a part of this podcast as well too. So man, we appreciate everybody who tuned in. Pray that something was said that was helpful. Y'all to remember, like, man, I'm a pastor, I'm a preacher. So one of the things that have to go on, and you probably noticed this, is we got to close at least 3 doors before it's actually over with. so you probably heard me saying we about to get ready to wrap it up. Probably about two or three times now. Just know that that's we got to close 3 doors before we actually sit down.
That's right. That's good stuff right there, bro. That was the preliminary close.
Right. The
pre-closing.
Right. Yeah, that's that. I'm getting ready to close.
Right.
Hey, good, what up, Ashley? Yeah, so man, once again, just appreciate everybody for hopping on. And just want to give just give you the floor if there's any last statements. Once again, you can let people know how they can find you. Any last statements, any last words of encouragement that you want to give as we get ready to get out of here today.
Yeah, man. So I guess I would just say, oh man, I'm hearing the echo. I don't know if that's me or.
Yeah, I don't hear anything on my end.
Okay, I'm sorry. But yeah, I just want to say, thank you. Thank you for, being gracious to have me, bro. You know what I'm saying? You're my brother. I have a great deal of respect for you. I am and will be praying, that your podcast will just blow up, man. Like we need this right here, bro. So I thank you for having me and for, sticking with me through the years, bro. You know what I'm saying? We on a journey, brother. You know what I'm saying? This is just the beginning, man. This is the beginning. So, thank you for that. But yeah, people can definitely check me out at True ID. It's TRUID apologetics.com. They can check me out at YouTube/True ID Apologetics. I still do have the archive of the True ID podcast. I've been tinkering with getting back into that. I got to figure out a way to make that happen. But people can check me out there, and definitely, again, I'm gonna keep flashing it, man. I'm gonna keep doing it. Definitely go out and cop Urban Apologetics, Restoring Black Dignity with the Gospel, edited by Eric Mason. I'm saying I don't know what I'm at liberty to say here, but the fact that the book is selling this well I really believe, to my understanding, not just I believe, like to my understanding, has really sent a message to the publishers in the industry that this type of work right here is something that people are hungry for, and I believe we want to continue to see an intellectual revolution and revival to take flame, particularly amongst millennials and so forth, in the Black church, that'll spill over into the Black community. We definitely want to see that. But most of all, man, I would encourage people, as you're tuning into these podcasts, as you're watching people on video and engaging in the stuff that we have in the Urban Apologetics community, as you're reading, the book, digest this stuff. Make sure you retain it. Listen to the podcast however many times you have to do to get a certain argument down. Read the book however many times you got to read it to get the argument down, and then go out and witness. I'm saying, use these things as resources so that you can get out there. Whether it be somebody in your family, somebody at your job, preferably when it's not work time, lunch or something like that, your school or whatever. I'm really big on evangelism. I'm saying I believe that the apologetics in and of itself is impotent unless it's serving some sort of purpose, such as discipleship and evangelism. I'm saying we don't want to just be learning for learning's sake. We want to make sure that we're employing these things in your own life to grow towards God, to get a better understanding of Him, His will, and His nature, and also to spread the gospel, man, so that other people can do the same. So I encourage people to use this resources. Please, I'm begging you. Use the resource, even if it means just buying a copy and giving it to somebody who's a stone cold heathen. You know what I'm saying? Buy the book. I'm saying, give it to them. Use this resource. Learn from it, and utilize this information to go out and make disciples. I'm really serious about that. That's what we want to see, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I concur, man. 100%, man. Like that's what it's all about. We're not just trying to just be knowledgeable just for the sake of knowledge in itself, man. Like this is, right. Man, there's work out here, man. People need to know who Christ is. And like, at the end of the day, don't get it twisted just because it reads unapologetically Black, unashamedly Christian, that the Christian part is any less than the Black part. No,
oh no,
it is because of who Christ is, and because I know who He is, that informs everything about me, including a society that tells me that I have to apologize for being Black. I say I won't apologize for being Black because of my faith and because of who Christ is. And ultimately that informs who I am. And that's what I stand upon. And that's why I'm unapologetically who I am, because I'm unapologetically embracing the way that He has created and made for me to be. So yeah, make sure you get that. But
and to your point, man, just to let people know, like when we and Zion can attest to this, when Eric Mason brought us together on a conference call, when we were first starting to plan the book and we were going over different topics, stuff like that, he provided an outline with some kind of guidelines in terms of how they wanted certain chapters to be framed. And one of the guidelines, look, this has to be biblically based, gospel centered. Like from the outset, let it not be confused. Eric Mason's directive was that every chapter, would be biblically based and gospel centered. So when we're putting this book out, this is not just a bunch of Black people having fun writing stuff. We're getting the gospel out, bro.
Yeah,
that's what this is about. It's biblically based, gospel centered information. And I would encourage you. I'm sorry. Now I'm gonna close after this one. I apologize. But
we used to get 3 doors today.
Yeah, man. You got 6 doors total. You know what I'm saying? Was it the final the kingdom and Revelation got like 12 gates? You know what I'm saying? It was like 12 doors. I'm saying we're our way towards that. But man, I want to say this: get this in the hands of the youth. You know what I'm saying? If you've got a youth group, they need to hear this. You know what I'm saying? Particularly teen, just really any age. You know what I'm saying? Especially those who are going off to college. If you have a young person who's going to be going off to college, man, I don't know what I would have done if I had something like that, in my hands when I went off to college. You know what I'm saying? I would have been armed and ready. You know what I'm saying? As argumentative as I am already, man, I would have been causing some problems at BCU. You understand? But if you have a young person at your church, if you have a relationship with them like that in the family, go ahead and get them a copy of the book. If you don't know the family that well, then give maybe that parent a copy of this book so that they can then look over it and then give it to that child. But in one way or the other, we need to get this in the hands of the youth so they're not going off to college and being bombarded by things that are easily answered by the biblical worldview. You know what I'm saying? Easily answered by the evidence that we have available. But if they're unequipped, then they'll be taken advantage of by the enemy, and we don't want to see that happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Equip the youth.
Absolutely. I'm gonna say this, and after this, we're gonna be out. I'm gonna say this, like legit. After this, we logging off.
Right.
Adam is one of the most thorough cats that I know. Like he is thorough, like completely thorough, right? But I gotta expose him today, though.
Oh man,
as thorough as he is.
He
didn't tell us where to find the t-shirts at.
He didn't tell us how to support him.
He didn't tell us about his Patreon. So what I'm gonna ask you to do, man, we finna log off, but I'm gonna ask you to please to drop that in the chat so people can know how to support, man, the work that you're doing, man.
I do have to get better about that. I mean, and I'll definitely give you the link to the Patreon, the PayPal. Again, True ID Apologetics is a 501c3 ministry, legit. And so any giving it can be tax deductible for sure. So, but I got to get better with that, man. I got to tighten up. My bad.
Nah, I got you, man. But we definitely want to find out ways that we can support you, man.
Thank you.
You're doing a phenomenal work out here. So, hey, look, man, once again, appreciate everybody. We ain't gonna hold y'all. We're gonna hold y'all any longer. Make sure we're getting ready. We'll be hopping in. We'll also be having Pastor Dan Richardson gonna be talking to us about doctrinal clarity. Then we he mentioned Isaiah Robinson. He's gonna talk to us about the history of intellectualism in the Black church. Mao Henny, Mom Hair. Dr. Vince Bantu is going to be talking to us in terms of academia, and we get to learn about different facets. We also want to point people to places where they can go so that this conversation, and of course it is limited, and we could talk about this from now until Jesus returns. But we have a time to just kind of expound on a few things, but follow the trail, and there's more than enough information for anybody who wants to be equipped. And if you're on this podcast tonight, and you're wrestling with your faith, I'm praying that God will strengthen you in your faith, and you can actually reach out to somebody, reach out to us. It doesn't matter. Like, man, we want to make sure that we are there to help. We've both been in a position where you might be right now. If you're struggling and wrestling through some things, and you're like, man, is there some answers out there? I want to encourage you by saying, yes, there are answers out there. But greater than even just having the right answers, there is a Lord and a Savior who cares deeply for you, right? There's one who has shed his blood for you. And whether you know him or not today, we want to just make it known to you, like the good news. There is good news, the Bizrod, the gospel, the evangelion, however you want to call it. There is good news for you, and you don't have to believe the lies of the enemy. There's a hope and a strength that we stand upon that is fortified and strong, and you also can hear more about that and follow the trail beyond even just this conversation. And we're praying for you, and if you have any questions or anything like that didn't get answered tonight, feel free to reach out. Like, we want to walk with you or point you in the right direction, but one thing that we don't want to do is to leave you out here by yourself and leave you out here alone. Not at all. Like, it's all we all about the gospel. It's all for his glory's sake. At the end of the day, that's where the rubber meets the road at. So I'm gonna say that, and on that piece, we're gonna get ready to get up out of here. Man, appreciate y'all. Y'all know what it is out of here. Peace.